I hope in the Lord, I trust in his word. With him there is kindness and plenteous redemption. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to the people in the synagogue at Nazareth, Amen, amen, I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own native place. Indeed, I tell you, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the sky was closed for 3.5 years, and a severe famine spread over the entire land. It was to none of these that Elijah was sent, but only to a widow in Zarephath in the land of Sidon. Again, there were many lepers in Israel during the time of Elisha the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. When the people in the synagogue heard this, they were all filled with fury. They rose up, drove him out of the town, and led him to the brow of the hill on which their town had been built, to hurl him down headlong. But he passed through the midst of them and went away. The Gospel of the Lord. Today, Jesus compares the people of the synagogue in Nazareth as the opposite of a man named Naaman the Syrian from the Old Testament. He accuses them of being prideful and arrogant and therefore not accepting his message out of pride. Who is this Naaman of Syria? We had the reading about him in the Old Testament reading this morning, the first reading. And I want to point out some things about Naaman because I actually think Naaman is a pretty neat story for us with a lot of spiritual insights. So first of all, who was Naaman the Syrian? We read in the story here that he was a Syrian. So if you remember world history, Syria and Assyria are the same places in the Old Testament. And this Naaman, he was a great man of Assyria. He was a commander of the king of Syria. So he wasn't the king, but he was the king's greatest commander, his greatest general. And he was from Assyria. As you might recall in the Old Testament, Assyria was one of the arch enemies of the people of Israel. Right? So Naaman was this great man from the kingdom of Assyria, this great commander, this great general, one of the most highly respected men in the whole nation. But Naaman, he had one problem. He had leprosy. Leprosy was not exactly a friend maker in the ancient world, right? So many of us have the same issue. Many of us might look all put together on the outside. We might be well respected. We might be successful. But all of us have something. Some aspect of our life, something that we don't like about ourselves, or maybe something from our past, something that holds us back, right? Just like Naaman. And then the rest of the story of Naaman, the leper, is about his journey to be healed of his leprosy. And lo and behold, Naaman has to greatly humble himself in order to be healed. For example, the first thing that happens is Naaman is this great commander, and he has his wife, and his wife has a servant who they captured on one of their military raids. And this little girl, this servant, she is the one who told Naaman to go and see the prophet Elijah. Right? So imagine this great and most respected of men. He's told by this little girl, a slave, a foreigner. She is giving him advice. And he has to humble himself. Not only that, but he has to ask permission from the king to go to Israel to speak to this prophet. So imagine Naaman, does he not only have leprosy, but now he has to reveal that to the king. And he has to ask his king for permission to go to the country, which is Assyria's arch nemesis, and to speak to the prophet there. Right? This whole story of Naaman is one of humility. Even at the end, when he finally meets the prophet Elisha, Elisha tells him to go and wash in the river Jordan. And what was Naaman's response? He was offended. That I thought I was going to show up and this prophet was going to wave his hands and he was going to heal me of my leprosy. And yet instead Elisha says, just go to the river Jordan and wash there. Now, again, if you've ever been to the Holy Land, you would understand why he says this. The River Jordan is nothing spectacular. In fact, it's pretty filthy, right? And yet that's where Naaman had to go and be washed. This whole story of Naaman was the story that is the same story for all of us, that all of us need to be healed of something. And no matter how successful and no matter how great in the eyes of the world we might appear, all of us is in desperate need of God. We are dependent on Him. We need to be healed by Him and made whole by Him. And every now and again, God sends us things in our life to remind us of that very fact. And sometimes those little crosses that God gives to us are actually the things that we most need, because they remind us of our dependence and our need for Him.